Look out, boxing fans, Ashy Knuckles. Um, let's talk about Miguel Cotto versus Sergio Martinez. Gotta love this fight. Um, Miguel Cotto making the attempt at becoming middleweight champion of the world. You gotta love it because this is the reason why Miguel Cotto will be regarded as one of the best of the era. It didn't matter who was hot. It didn't matter who was the best. He went for them. He went to make the fight happen. He went after these guys. Whoever was the best. Whether it was Pacquiao, and Miguel Cotto was coming off of wars when he went for Pacquiao. Whether it was Margarito, Mayweather, who was considered the best, he went after him. Fought Trout when nobody else wanted to fight Trout. Now he's going after Sergio Martinez, who, due to the emergence of Golovkin, people aren't regarding Martinez as high as he should be because he hasn't been beaten, and Golovkin has not beaten him, and they haven't fought yet. But still, the fact remains: the best middleweight in the world is Sergio Martinez until defeated. Golovkin haven't even fought a whole lot of middleweights still. But he's a badass motherfucker, though. You know what I'm saying? I won't take that away. Still and so, you want to be the middleweight champion of the world, you beat Martinez. You don't beat Golovkin. He's just a titleist. The champ is Martinez. And that's what Cotto's doing. He's going up in weight, although he was being a diva at the negotiating table. Those are some of the spoils of being a star fighter. Outside of Pacquiao and Mayweather, the most lucrative ticket in boxing is a Miguel Cotto fight. He can hold his own. His pay-per-view numbers aren't as good as Pacquiao and Mayweather, obviously, but Mayweather and Pacquiao's pay-per-view numbers are unprecedented. Nobody really did those numbers. Not even De La Hoya did those numbers. Now, granted, De La Hoya was the cash cow at one time, and when he was the cash cow, nobody did De La Hoya numbers, except for like the heavyweights, Tyson, Holyfield, but Mayweather has surpassed that, and I think even Pacquiao has surpassed that as well. But Cotto is still among the top three in lucrative fights, and being of the fact that he is a star fighter and the Cotto fight represents a big money fight, he has the ability to dictate at the negotiating table. And it's been done. A lot of people have been, giving him a lot of flack for it because, he's been kind of picking everything, the ring size, picking the gloves, pick who comes in first, who gets announced first, even though I'm sure Miguel Cotto wants to come in last and he wants to be announced last. It's typical of the treatment you would give to a champion. But like I said, when you are a star fighter, things change. The champion don't really get to dictate like they're supposed to. And all the star fighters have done it. It just hasn't been publicized like it is today. I mean, everybody who was quote unquote a pay-per-view star dictated the terms of a fight, not just in terms of how much money they're going to get as opposed to their opponent, but also the ring size, the gloves, who gets announced first. Oscar did the shit. It wasn't just all about the money. He dictated all that shit. Roy Jones did that shit. He would make guys wear the same gloves he wore, which were like Grant's. He would choose the size of the ring, which would be a championship size ring. Who would come in first and get announced first and all that. He did it. Of course, Floyd does it. Eric Morales, he did it. I mean, he made Pacquiao wear those winning gloves, that Japanese brand, winning. Most of the fighters that actually make good money in the sport of boxing, they use winning gloves in training. And the reason why is because winning gloves, most people refer to them as big ass pillows because they have very insulated padding in the glove and in the your cup, your protector. Uh, they even make headgear. All that stuff is very well padded. You know what I'm saying? And they call it pillows. At least the gloves, they call it pillows. And Eric Morales, because he had hand problems, as well as Floyd and a lot of other fighters, um, some of them choose to wear winning gloves. I think even Jamal Charlo wore winning gloves when he beat the shit out of Gabriel Rosado. But the winning gloves, they're actually an expensive pair of gloves. But they offer the best protection outside of Grant gloves and other highly padded gloves. Winning gloves are probably the best as far as protection. They do take away as far as the impact, but um, it's more mental than anything. But Eric Morales made Pacquiao wear winning gloves when they first fought, and when Pacquiao got his ass whooped, him and Freddie Roach were acting like because he used those gloves, that's why they lost. No, it's because Eric Morales using those gloves on your ass is why you lost that fight. You know, a puncher can punch with any glove. That was my argument back then. You know, and the media they just went with it. Oh, he didn't get to wear his Reyes gloves. That's why Eric Morales won. No, Eric Morales just beat your ass. You know what I'm saying? Don't take credit away from the victory, which they did. You know, they were big Pacquiao fans. The media were, and you know that's good. You know, to be a fan and all, but you still got to cover the sport from an unbiased eye. And if your eye was really unbiased, you would have seen that Eric Morales beat Pacquiao. He should have got a unanimous decision as opposed to a split decision. But as I've said many times, that's why you got 3 sets of eyes that judge fights. But back to the point is star fighters usually have that treatment. They get to negotiate the terms of a fight. And in that fight, Pacquiao had to wear winning gloves. And he blamed the gloves as to why he lost the fight. He said if he was able to wear his Reyes gloves, he would have knocked out Morales. And of course, in the 2 fights that happened after that with Eric Morales, he knocked him out with Reyes gloves. But that doesn't mean what he said in the first fight was true. A puncher can punch with any gloves. Can you imagine if Mike Tyson wore winning gloves? Do you think he wasn't going to knock guys out? It was bullshit. Mike Tyson would have knocked guys out with any glove because he was a puncher. Look at Canelo. When Canelo knocked out Carlos Baldomir, he wore winning gloves when he knocked him out. So it was bullshit. The argument was bullshit. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that's neither here or there. We're going back to the actual fight at hand, and you know why star fighters have that treatment. You're gonna do what you got to do to make the fight. And the reason why you're going to do what you got to do to make the fight is because if you're fighting a guy who can guarantee you a certain amount of money that you're not promised to see facing anybody else, you're going to give up these things, these little things to make the fight. And in the end, even though Sergio Martinez bucked, he didn't want to give up all these things to Cotto. In the end, what did he do? He gave it up because you're not going to see the type of money fighting anybody else outside of Mayweather and Pacquiao. Than you would for fighting Cotto. So you give him what he wants. And in the end, Martinez, mad as hell, you know, because he's not getting the championship treatment. He says, give him what he wants and I'll beat his fucking ass when we fight. But still and so, you got to give Miguel Cotto the credit for actually wanting to go up in weight and test himself at a higher weight. It's hard as fuck to go to middleweight to fight. It's not like all the other weights. You know, I'm not even going to keep going through all this. There's a hump there going from 54 to 60. A substantially bigger guy can make that weight. If you ever been around middleweights, you will understand exactly what I'm saying. These guys are not fucking small, man. They are not small. These guys are bigger. A substantially bigger guy can make that weight. It seems like that's where it really begins, at 60. 60 on up. These guys are huge, man. These are bigger guys. They hit harder. They can endure a whole lot more from a smaller guy. Even Bernard Hopkins said it best when, guys were coming up in weight to fight him. They're artificial middleweights. It's the fucking truth. It is the truth. So, props to Cotto for wanting to test himself. daring to be great, which is a statement or a cliche, if you will, or a quote that's historic. Everybody knows what daring to be great is. Testing yourself when conventional wisdom, historical data have proven otherwise, that you will most likely be unsuccessful in that venture. That's basically what he's doing. He's going up in weight to test himself against a highly skilled guy who is bigger than himself. And I know Martinez has said have said in the past on many occasions that he's really a 54 pounder, but after so many years and so many fights of fighting at their weight, in my opinion, he's not a 54 pounder anymore. Now, granted, he's probably not the biggest 60 pounder out there, but until he goes back down and makes 54 and fight at that weight again, I don't consider him a 54 pounder. And I don't think the catch weight with him and Miguel Cotto is going to be a big of a difference, as Martinez never really weighed in at 160 pounds on the dot. He always came in a couple of pounds lighter. So I don't, even though Cotto probably considered that as an advantage on his part, I really don't think it's going to be an advantage. I just think Martinez is going to be in much better shape, coming in a little lighter, maybe a pound lighter. And in the fight itself, you know, Miguel Cotto, I'll give him his credit. I'm not going to really touch on all the things he does well. I'll highlight a few. Everybody knows about the notorious left hook to the body. And he has a very stiff jab, being of the fact that he is a left-handed person, but he fights as a conventional fighter. So what does that mean? That means his jab and his hook have a little something extra on it, being that's his strength hand, that's his strong hand. And that has been to his benefit throughout his fucking career, because when Cotto throws a jab, you feel it. And he's able to actually dictate what he wants to do in the ring based on the fact of him having a very powerful jab. It doesn't just keep you offset. I think he can actually put a guy down with that jab. And you know he can put a guy out with that hook. And he's notorious for breaking guys down, hurting them, taking what they do, and finding something to combat it. You know, he's able to close the distance on guys, beat them to the body, set up beautiful combinations to the head and body, and basically have spectacular victories, as you saw against Delvin Rodriguez. It wasn't the best victory by Cotto by far, but it answers some questions that people have for him coming off of those defeats against Mayweather and Trout. So it proved that Cotto was still a viable threat in this game, that he actually had a whole lot more left in the tank. I think in the Mayweather fight, he proved he had a whole lot more left in the tank. And Cotto, knowing that he only has maybe a few fights or a few years left in the game, continues to want to test himself. And that's something that Mayweather could actually use, you know, a fucking pair. You know, test yourself, because I would have much more preferred if Mayweather would have went after Sergio Martinez than Cotto. You know what I'm saying? Mayweather hasn't been defeated, and he has the ability to blow this historical thing wide open based on the guys that he chooses to fight for his last fights leaving the game. And as you see, he continues to fight guys that are not necessarily that he know he can beat or he's trying to protect his O. If you really want to protect your O, then you don't fight. Because every time you get in the ring, your O is at risk. Any man has a chance. But to me, he's not fighting the most dangerous opponents. He's not fighting the most formidable opponents. It's not that the guys that he fighting are garbage, or they can't fight, or they don't have a chance. It's just there are other guys out there that he can fight, fights that are makeable, if that's a word, fights that are doable, that he can fight. Sergio Martinez is a fight that can be made. He is not with Top Rank. He's been with Lou DiBella. Last time I checked, DiBella and Golden Boy still have a decent relationship, to the point where they can actually make fights. So I don't see why Floyd didn't even consider fighting Martinez, even though Martinez has went on record saying he was willing to go down to 152 pounds. 152 pounds just to make the fight. It was a great fight to make. And, you know, Mayweather Promotions and Golden Boy act as if he's running out of options when there are options out there. It's bullshit. You know what I'm saying? But I digress off of that. Um, like I said, Cotto, he can close the distance, beat guys up to the head and body. He also has shown the ability to box, and he's actually a pretty good boxer. You know, he can utilize the whole ring. As you can see against the rematch against Sergio, not Sergio, but fucking Margarito. He used every square inch of that ring. He boxed him. He actually had a really decent performance in that fight, and he did fairly well. It's not the best performance I've seen versus Antonio Margarito. Of course, we know what Pacquiao did to him. But Joshua Clottey was beating a dog shit out of Margarito until he hurt his hands, and then he went in survival mode. He still didn't get beat down, but he lost on the cards. But prior to him breaking his hands, he was dominating Margarito. Of course, we saw how Shane Mosley looked against Margarito. That was a very dominant display of fighting. It wasn't a boxing match. Most people pegged Margarito to win. He was coming off of that Cotto victory. And a lot of people at that time considered Shane Mosley to be shot, even though Shane Mosley was, you know, trying to get his career back going again, you know, fighting guys like Collazo and some other guys he were trying to rebuild his career with, coming off of that Cotto defeat and, you know, the defeats prior to that, you know, Vernon Forrest, Winky Wright, and the like. So the fight with Margarito and Cotto, the rematch, proved that Cotto can actually box. We've seen him do it in other fights as well. But in this fight with Martinez, he will be fighting or boxing against a guy who actually has better boxing skills. And he's fighting a much bigger guy, a guy who has actually fought at middleweight several times, has defended his world title at that weight several times against substantially bigger guys at that weight. Guys who hit harder, guys who are larger, and I don't see Cotto being able to outbox him. I also don't see Cotto being able to force his will against Martinez, as guys that are bigger than Cotto have tried it and have failed miserably. Add to the fact that Martinez is a southpaw boxer puncher who has great movement, and a decent punch, a heavy, decent punch, who fights in angles, utilizes his pivots and his attacking at angles. They call him an ambush fighter. Prior to the 2000, I don't know, 5 or 6, I've never heard of ambush fighting. I think that's something that Max Kellerman made up. But I understand what he's saying, how he attacks. It is like an ambushing type of style. But he attacks in angles though. He's a very angular fighter, if that means anything. I may have made that up. So the debate as far as who hits hardest at this weight, I haven't seen Miguel Cotto fight anybody at middleweight, so I wouldn't be able to firmly say he's the harder puncher. I have seen Martinez hit guys at this weight and knock guys out, so I would be leaning in his direction as far as the power, hand speed Martinez, foot speed, and, you know, boxing ability Martinez, and experience at the championship level. You probably give, I don't know, if not a tie, you would lean it towards Miguel Cotto. But at the end of the day, you can analyze this till you're blue in the face. The ring sorts out the facts. It's a good fight. Maybe Miguel Cotto feels that he's still growing. He's not necessarily long in the tooth, but he's getting older in this game. And I doubt if his body is still naturally growing and taking him to a different division. I truly think he just wants to be great and test himself and be the first Puerto Rican fighter to win a title in four divisions. And it's doable. Martinez is not young. He's getting older. As you can see, he's been prone to injuries. And he is not the most fundamentally sound fighter. He fights with his hands down. If you know Ash, you know I've never been a fan of the Roy Jones School of Boxing. I believe in fundamentals. You know, Roy was able to do something that's unheard of for so many years, fighting with his hands at his waist, at his knees, and taking chances by, going after guys with his hands down and using his natural speed and agility and reflexes to avoid getting hit flush by small shots or big shots for such a long time. And Sergio Martinez has taken that game plan and used it successfully as well. Not as good as Roy, but damn good. Good enough to accomplish what he's accomplished. But it don't last forever. And sometimes one night, all it takes is one bad outing to see that it's just not there anymore. And it usually happens around the time and age that Sergio Martinez, the age that he is right now, in the latter 30s. And he's actually shown signs that he's beginning to not necessarily fade, but break down in fights, wear and tear. So it may be the right timing for Miguel Cotto to actually go after Sergio Martinez. We'll just have to see. Until then, we'll just have to be glad that a fight of this magnitude has been made and continue to give Miguel Cotto props for wanting to raise the bar. Not just for boxing itself, not just for Puerto Rican fighters, but fighters in general. Kudos to the man. I'm not going to hold it against him that he's been doing all this bullshit at the negotiating table. They've been doing that shit in the history of the sport. It's just more publicized now than it's ever been. But all the guys have done that. All the star fighters have been a prick at the negotiating table. Even Ray Robinson was a prick at the negotiating table. Now, I don't know in depth the actual details of everything he wanted. I know he wanted a piece of all the money, wanted a piece of the gate, wanted a piece of, every piece of revenue. I know Robinson was on it like that, but I don't know if it was as far as gloves and the weight and, the size of the ring and shit like that. I don't know if it was like that. I wasn't around at that time. And even back when I first got into boxing, I didn't analyze it. I was watching it out of amazement for my heroes. You know what I'm saying? Fighting. I grew in the sport and learned about it. At that time, those guys can do no wrong. That's why I usually don't even compare guys of this era to guys from back in the game, because when I first started watching boxing, I didn't analyze it. I just watched it out of, amazement and shit. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and pick a winner on this, man. I don't think Sergio Martinez is done. I think the time away from the sport is much better for an older fighter as it is than it is for a guy in his prime. A guy in his prime loses time, is inactive. It hurts him tremendously. An older fighter, time away doesn't hurt nearly that much. You need that time to heal. Your body's been through a whole lot. And considering that he's coming off an injury, the only thing that can hurt Sergio Martinez at this juncture of inactivity is his timing. He may show a little rust. So he's probably going to need the rounds. I don't think Cotto's necessarily the right type of fighter to get rounds in against, but at the end of the day, the fight is made. If he's have a good training camp and get sharp in camp, maybe Cotto's not that hard to find on fight night. Maybe he'll have a spectacular win. I think it's going to be an uphill battle because Cotto's going to be a lot slower at this weight. He's going to endure a much heavier punch at this weight, and I can't say with certitude that Sergio Martinez is going to be slower than anything he's seen before. I think it's going to be a guy with the same type of speed that guy shown at 54 and 47, but it would be a bigger guy. And I think Martinez. I love Cotto, but I think Cotto gets knocked out in this one. I don't think he sees the final bell, even if he gets hurt and begins to wilt and retreat, as we have seen in some of his fights, which you hurt Cotto, he begins to try to survive the fight, like against Pacquiao. and against Mosley, and against who else he did that shit against? I think that's it. No, I could say Philip Indu, not Philip, but Lovemore Indu back at 140 pounds. He put it on Cotto's ass, and he didn't get the victory in that fight. But I've seen that if you put it on Cotto, after a while he will begin to wilt. But you have to really put some on him, and I think that's gonna happen. I think Martinez is gonna put some on him, and it's gonna be brutal. And like I said, props to Miguel Cotto for even taking this fight, trying to do the unthinkable and win this fight against a bigger guy at a bigger weight. And can't wait to see it. But I got Martinez by knockout. Deuce.